My stepfather also left the house quietly, so I didn't think much of it, assuming he had gone to work. As usual, after breakfast, I started cleaning the kitchen, washing dishes, with only the sound of running water and clinking plates filling the room. I was so focused on my task that I didn't notice someone approaching me from behind until a rough hand suddenly gripped my waist tightly. I tried to resist, but the strong hold kept me frozen, fear washing over me as panic set in. The once familiar kitchen now felt suffocating, making it hard to breathe, and that moment marked the beginning of my haunting story. My name is Evelyn, and I am 22 years old. My father passed away when I was a child, so I was raised by my mother, Yissa, a strong and resilient woman who made countless sacrifices for me. Although our life wasn't always easy, she taught me to be independent and face challenges with courage. When I turned 18, my mother surprised me by revealing that she had met someone special and wanted to take their relationship further. Given that she had never paid much attention to love since my father's passing, I was taken aback. However, this time, she seemed different. Their eyes sparkled, and a constant smile graced her lips. She wanted me to meet this man, to introduce him as part of our family. The day I met Aiden, my future stepfather, I was stunned. He was tall, youthful, and only a few years older than me. From a distance, no one would have guessed he was my mother's partner. He could have easily been mistaken for my brother or a friend. His deep blue eyes and charming smile made him instantly likable, yet his youthful appearance and elegance left me puzzled. I couldn't understand why someone like Aiden would choose my mother, a woman over 40. At first, I pretended to be at ease, not wanting to upset her, but over time, an uneasy feeling grew within me. I often asked, "Mom, why did he marry you? He's so young. Are you sure he doesn't have some hidden motive?" But she always dismissed my concerns, firmly insisting that their love was genuine and not defined by age. I tried to believe her, yet something about Aiden's behavior unsettled me. He was always polite and helpful, cooking, cleaning, and assisting my mother in ways I had never seen from any other man. However, the way he looked at me was different, not like a stepfather gazing at his stepdaughter, but with something I couldn't quite put into words. I convinced myself that I was overthinking and tried to give him a chance. Eventually, my mother and Aiden got married after just a few months of dating, making him an official part of our family. But his presence changed everything. Meals became tense, filled with an unspoken discomfort I couldn't name. Yet, I dared not voice my feelings because my mother was genuinely happy. She trusted Aiden wholeheartedly, believing he had brought joy and stability into her life after years of loneliness. As time passed, I adjusted to Aiden's presence. Though initially hesitant, I couldn't deny that he brought happiness to my mother. He continued helping with household chores and remained courteous, and gradually, I convinced myself that my doubts were mere imagination. One evening, after an exhausting day at school, I went to the bathroom to relax. Since I hadn't done laundry, I hung my underwear in the bathroom, planning to wash it the next morning. After my shower, I wrapped a towel around myself and stepped out to find clothes. But when I returned for my underwear, it had vanished. At first, I assumed I had misplaced it. I searched the bathroom, checked under the sink, and even looked in my room among my dirty clothes, but it was nowhere to be found. A strange feeling crept over me. I was certain I had hung it there before my shower, so where had it gone? After changing, I went to the living room, where my mother and Aiden were watching television, both looking relaxed. My mother laughed at a scene on the screen, completely at ease. Hesitantly, I asked, "Mom, Stepdad, did anyone go into the bathroom just now? I took a shower, but something seems to be missing." They both turned to me in surprise. My mother asked, "What did you lose?" Not wanting to be too specific, I simply replied, "Just a personal item. I had left something in the bathroom, but now it's gone." Aiden smiled slightly and shook his head. "No one went in. Maybe you left it somewhere else." My mother agreed, "Try to remember where you put it. Aiden and I have been sitting here the whole time." I nodded and returned to my room, trying to convince myself that I had just forgotten where I placed it. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't fade. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, yet deep inside, I couldn't help but wonder if I hadn't misplaced it, then what had really happened to my underwear. From that moment on, an unshakable unease settled in my mind, a feeling I couldn't explain or ignore. That eerie feeling of being watched never left me. At first, I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that I was just being overly sensitive after the unsettling incident of my missing underwear. But instead of fading, the sensation grew stronger, more persistent. The strangest part was when I took a shower. My bathroom door was made of frosted glass enough to blur details but still allow a faint outline to be visible from inside. Initially, I paid no attention, but over time, I started noticing a shadow lingering outside the door. It was never clear, just a faint silhouette that would appear for a few seconds before vanishing. The first time I saw it was one evening after I stepped into the bathroom and turned on the hot water to relax. In a fleeting moment, I caught sight of a dark figure standing beyond the glass. I froze, holding my breath as my heart pounded. "Who's there?" I called softly, but silence was my only answer. Slowly, I moved closer, trying to get a better look, but by the time I reached the door, the shadow was gone. When I finally gathered the courage to open it, the hallway outside was empty, illuminated only by the dim light from the living room. I stood there, listening for any sign of movement, but the house remained eerily quiet. I told myself it was just a trick of the light or my imagination playing games with me, yet the uneasy feeling refused to leave. It wasn't just in the bathroom. Over the following days, the sensation of being watched seemed to follow me everywhere, making every corner of the house feel unsafe. Whenever I walked down the hallway, I had the creeping suspicion that someone was trailing behind me. I would often glance back, only to be met with an empty corridor and an unsettling silence. Even in the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling of invisible eyes on me, as though someone was silently observing my every move. In the kitchen or near the window, I would catch glimpses of a figure in my peripheral vision just enough to send a shiver down my spine, but every time I turned to look, there was nothing. During the day, I tried to reason with myself, convincing myself it was all in my head. Maybe it was just shifting shadows or reflections playing tricks on me. But at night, when the house fell into darkness and the silence deepened, the fear became almost unbearable. I felt like every step I took echoed in my ears and someone else's. Even in my own room, I couldn't escape the unease. Late at night, whether reading or trying to sleep, I would hear faint footsteps outside my door. It always sounded like someone walking past and then stopping. I would gather my courage and check the hallway, but each time, I found nothing. The doors to the other rooms remained shut, and the house was as still as ever. I never spoke to my mother about it, knowing she would scold me for being too paranoid. "You're overthinking things," she would say. Aiden, on the other hand, remained as calm and composed as ever. There was no sign of anything unusual in his behavior, and yet, that was what unsettled me the most. His demeanor was too perfect, too controlled. It made him unreadable, and the more time passed, the more my unease grew. Then, just as I had started to push my suspicions aside, it happened again. My underwear vanished from the bathroom, exactly like before. That night, after finishing my shower, I got dressed and stepped out to dry my hair. I stood in front of the mirror in the living room, enjoying the simple comfort of the moment. Just as I was about to return to the bathroom to brush my teeth, the door suddenly opened and Aiden walked out. He was fully dressed, a towel in his hand. "Just grabbing a towel for your mom," he said with his usual gentle smile. I nodded, not giving it much thought at first. But when I stepped back into the bathroom, I immediately sensed that something was wrong. I glanced at the hanger where I had left my underwear and it was gone. I searched the entire bathroom, checking the laundry basket and every possible corner, but there was no trace of it. A strange chill ran down my spine. Then, as I replayed the moment in my head, an unsettling realization hit me. Aiden had just walked out of the bathroom. Was it just a coincidence? Had he really just come in to grab a towel, or was there something more to it? My instincts screamed at me, but I forced myself to stay quiet. I didn't confront him, didn't let on that I suspected anything. Instead, I decided to observe him more closely. From that moment on, I watched every move he made, studying his expressions, his gestures, his interactions. Strangely, it felt like he knew I was watching him. His actions always seemed perfectly normal, too deliberate, as if he was putting on a performance. The more I observed, the more I felt trapped in a game I didn't understand. Then came a Saturday when I had the day off. My mother and Aiden still had to go to work, and as usual, Aiden woke up early to prepare breakfast. He was as polite and composed as ever, casually chatting with my mother while she smiled happily. After she finished eating, she hurried out the door, needing to get to work on time. Aiden followed soon after but paused before leaving, turning back to me. "Take it easy today," he said with his usual gentle tone. "Call me if you need anything." I nodded, forcing a smile. But deep down, the unease wouldn't go away. Something about his words, his presence, his entire existence in this house, it all felt wrong. After finishing breakfast, I cleared the dining table and began tidying up the living room. The house was eerily quiet, my footsteps echoing softly across the floor. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow over the familiar space, yet something about today felt different. As I bent down to pick up a few scattered items, a rough hand suddenly wrapped around my waist, gripping me tightly from behind. I froze, my breath caught in my chest, paralyzed by shock and fear. Before I could react, a low voice whispered near my ear. "You're so cute, Evelyn." My heart nearly stopped at the sound of Aiden's voice. Panic surged through me, and I struggled against his hold, my voice trembling as I shouted, "Let me go." But he didn't move away. Instead, he let out a quiet chuckle, his breath brushing against my skin, sending a wave of dread through me. "I'm not doing anything," he murmured. "I just wanted to play a little." Though his tone seemed calm, there was something unnervingly cold beneath it. His grip didn't loosen. Instead, it tightened, making me feel even more trapped. A suffocating fear wrapped around me, and the rough pressure of his arms made my skin crawl. I fought harder, twisting and pushing against him, but he only held me closer, as if testing how much I could resist. "What are you doing? Let me go!" I yelled, my voice shaking with rage and terror. Aiden didn't respond immediately. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my neck, sending chills down my spine. "You're so nervous, Evelyn," he finally said, his voice smooth but devoid of any real amusement. I was just kidding. But there was no humor in his tone, only something far more unsettling. I pushed against him again, my hands shaking. "I told you to stop," I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. But instead of letting go, his grip became even stronger. It felt as if I was caught in a trap I couldn't escape. Then, his eyes darkened, and his voice dropped lower, more intense. "I wanted you from the first time I saw you," he admitted, his words clear and deliberate, each syllable cutting into me like ice. "I didn't dare act before, I feared your mother would find out. But today, I couldn't wait any longer." My body went rigid as his words sank in. I stared at him, unable to process what I had just heard. "You're beautiful, Evelyn," he continued, his voice dripping with intent I didn't want to acknowledge. I felt my world crumbling around me. His expression flickered with internal conflict, but it quickly shifted to something darker: determination. "Your mother isn't the one I desire," he confessed. "It's you, it's always been you." A wave of nausea washed over me. How could he say such things? Aiden, the man my mother loved, the man she trusted, was now revealing a truth so vile, so unthinkable. My heart pounded violently in my chest as I struggled to find my voice. "Evelyn," he said again, this time his voice tinged with a disturbing mix of pleading and certainty. "Just once, let me have you just this once. I swear, I won't hurt your mother. This will be our secret." Rage and disgust exploded within me. "What the hell are you thinking?" I screamed, thrashing in his grip. But his strength overpowered me, his hold unyielding. I felt his breath near my ear, suffocating me, making my skin crawl. My panic turned into raw fear as I realized how helpless I was. Everything blurred. My strength seemed to drain away, as though he had complete control over me. His words, his eyes, his touch, everything had crossed a line that could never be undone. That entire day spiraled into chaos, one I couldn't comprehend or even put into words. My emotions twisted into a mess of guilt, terror, and confusion. I kept replaying the moment over and over in my head, unable to grasp how things had escalated to this point. How had I let this happen? How had I ended up in a situation so horrifying, so wrong? Time crawled unbearably slow, each second stretching into eternity. I was trapped in a reality I couldn't escape, burdened by a shame I couldn't understand. When my mother finally arrived home in the evening, she seemed surprised to see Aiden already there. He was usually late from work, yet today was different. She placed her bag down, turning to him with a questioning look, completely unaware of the nightmare that had just unfolded in her absence. "You're home early today. I usually see you come back later than me," my mother remarked with mild surprise. As always, Aiden remained composed, his expression calm and unwavering. With an easy smile, he walked over to her, took her bag, and replied, "I finished early today. I thought you'd be happy if we had dinner together. You've been working so hard lately." His voice was gentle, his words perfectly reasonable, but they sent a shiver down my spine. He showed no sign of guilt, no trace of hesitation, as if nothing had happened. My mother smiled, pleased by his thoughtfulness, and asked no further questions. She headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner, completely unaware of the nightmare I was living. But I was not the same. Something inside me had shifted irreversibly. Even though what had happened between Aiden and me had ended, the guilt and shame still clung to me, seeping into my every thought. I could no longer look at him the way I once did. He had been someone I tried to see as family, but now, all I felt toward him was hatred and disgust. I knew our relationship would never return to what it was before. Every day under the same roof became unbearable. Fear and guilt wrapped around me like an endless nightmare. At every family meal, I felt his gaze lingering on me, longer than it should. It was no longer the look of a stepfather toward his stepdaughter, but something much darker, something that made my skin crawl. My mother, so trusting, so unaware, continued to believe in the image of the man she loved, while I was drowning in tormenting thoughts. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave. I told my mother that I wanted to move out, that I was an adult now and needed to learn to be independent. She was shocked by my sudden decision, unwilling to accept it at first. "You don't have to go anywhere," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Stay here with me. I don't want you living alone. It's dangerous." But I stood firm. I assured her that I was old enough to take care of myself, that this was something I needed to do to grow and experience life. After much hesitation, she finally agreed, though I knew she didn't understand my true reason for leaving. And I had no intention of telling her. Yet, when I finally walked out of that house, I didn't feel the relief I had hoped for. The pain was still there, burning deep inside me. But at least the distance would put space between me and Aiden, between me and the memories I desperately wanted to erase. Only I knew that this wasn't the first step to freedom. It was simply the only way I could save myself from the suffocating darkness I could no longer bear. Life is full of unexpected trials, moments that test us in ways we never imagined. How we face them defines who we become. My story is a painful lesson about fear, guilt, and the importance of protecting yourself from those who should never have been a threat. To anyone going through something similar, never stay silent. If you feel unsafe, if someone who should protect you is the one hurting you, speak up. Silence may seem like the easier choice, but it can also become a prison, trapping you in pain and isolation. Seek help, whether from family, friends, or support organizations. Sometimes, the only way to break free is to tell the truth. Listen to your instincts. If your home no longer feels safe, if you cannot be at peace in your own space, then it's time to make a change. Leaving isn't running away, it's choosing to protect yourself, to reclaim your sense of security. And to parents, always pay attention to your children. Sometimes, the smallest changes in behavior or the vaguest words can be signs of a much deeper pain. Your love and awareness could be the only thing standing between them and suffering they are too afraid to voice. Life will always bring challenges, but we have the power to choose how we face them. Be strong. Be brave. You deserve to live in peace, to find happiness. This is where my story ends. Thank you for listening. I hope we meet again.